Hello everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to break down the recording. This recording was done over 2 days. There was a full day at Sunset Sound. Craig at Sunset Sound and Paul, of course, the owner, gave us the studio for nothing, which was very generous of them. And they gave us 2 days. So they need a really big shout out because that was absolutely wonderful. Now, obviously, Dick Wagner, my very dear friend, was very, very well respected by all of these incredible musicians that came here. So between him, his talent and the respect level that he had, and of course the fact that this is for St. Jude's Children's Hospital, was a huge deal. So we got to work with some incredible people. Day one was in the Prince Room, as I like to call it. That's Studio 3, and that's where we did all the basic tracking. The great thing about that room is the live room is pretty expansive and allows the drums, obviously with Danny Serafin, and then we had Leland Sklar, we had Jennifer Batten, we had Elliot Easton, we had all these incredible musicians, plus 2 keyboard players in there. There's a piano in the back, so we had piano going on there. We had organ, acoustic guitars being recorded in a separate room. It's a wonderful thing. Studio 3 really allows you to record multiple instruments at the same time. That was the room that Prince camped out in for a few years and made, I believe, 3 albums. 2 of which are 2 of his most successful albums of all time. 1999, of course, was done in that room. And just a really, really incredible environment. Then we came back a few days later with the kids' choir and with all of those stars as well, Carmine Appice and a whole bunch of other people. Carmine was there first day as well, doing percussion. But he came back again with tons of other incredible people and all of the kids. And we did in Studio 2, which is the Neve room, the Dixie Chicks big album was done in there. You'll probably know that room from that video that he did with Rick Rubin and Jim Scott. That's where we did all the kids' choir. So it was a pretty amazing experience. It really was. It was truly wonderful to work with incredible players, but also to work with an incredible song, a great songwriter, and a really amazing and gentle person, Mr. Dick Wagner. You'll know him from The Frost, if you really know your classic rock from the 60s. But of course, he worked with Alice Cooper. He wrote Only Women Bleed. He was the guitar player on Berlin and of course Rock and Roll Animal by Lou Reed. He played on so many amazing albums, He played with Aerosmith. He very famously played a guitar solo on a particular Aerosmith track. He also played very famously a very famous Aerosmith guitar riff. Look him up. He's got lots of incredible credits. He was a wonderful guy and I was very blessed to call him my friend. So let's get stuck into this track. There's tons of footage, stuff that you can watch. There's the full video of the song, but let's get stuck into the track now. Now, I mixed this entirely hybrid. So you're going to see my mix process here in the box, but also reflected going out through the console. You obviously can mix this track any way that you want. In the box, hybrid, through the console only, whatever it might be. But this is the process that I chose. You know, I came to work with Dick in the last few years of his life, and I wish that I got to work with him more because he had a back catalogue of songs, and we were talking about making an album together, which would have been phenomenal. With these same players, with Danny and with Leland or Lee, and it just would have been an amazing album. So he definitely died too soon. So the interesting thing about this song is there's no click. It wasn't cut to a click. It was just breathed the way classic rock and roll used to in the 60s and the 70s. So, you know, with guys that played on those records from the 60s and the 70s. Now, this is actually all one take. I just separated it out because I was going to treat it very slightly differently. But let's just go to this main piano here so we can see. This is Freddie, or Fred Mandel. So as a high-end boost, this is the Steinway in Studio 3. That's a beautiful piano, high boost. You can tell he plays with Elton John. I'm listening for bleed. You can't hear it. Tiny bit of drum bleed. So a lot of what's going on in here is more about what's going on the console. There's not a huge amount here. What I do have is the analog channel, which I love. Again, the way I've got the bias set up as I'm rolling off some super lows and I'm boosting some highs. It's set pretty hi-fi at 30 IPS, which is, and it's Swiss, so basically it's a Studer. It's an emulation of a Studer. Not doing a huge amount. Yeah, I can hear the drums bleeding there. But who cares? We didn't edit it heavily. It's a performance. It's you saw how many instruments were playing at once. If there's drum bleed, who cares? For a start, it's super low. But even if it was louder, it wouldn't necessarily matter because they're all in the same room performing together. Don't get me wrong. This is behind a glass door, but they're all in one big environment working off each other, performing at the same time. Okay, and then the same is true here. It seems like on the intro there, I didn't roll off the high, I didn't roll off any low end on this little melody part that he did. So what I'm doing is, because there's nothing else going on, if you ever listen. Love is what you get when love... So what I'm doing there is I'm not rolling off the low lows. First of all, there's barely any on there. But secondly, the piano's sitting on its own, so it's basically the whole track, isn't it? This is what's really important, and why high passing and low passing, but particularly high passing, is so important, is it's about like where we get a build-up of lots of instruments crossing over. There's no need to high pass the piano there, because any lows that might be there, might be evident, are good, because it's not competing with anything. But obviously in a drum track, if we go over here, I am high passing because I don't need anything interfering with my kick drum. So hence why there's a different EQ, much gentler EQ, hardly any top end boost, and no high passing going on. But still with the love is what you... Beautiful. Oh, and then the other thing, of course, is I've got a little bit of reverb here. I've got the Eventide reverb. It's got the high end taken out of it a little bit. It's a 3-second decay sound. But it's not overly loud. If you hear me stop it. It's a nice delay. So basically it's a delayed reverb. Listen to it. Pretty tasty. So I like Eventides. I like a lot of reverbs, as you can tell, but that one in particular is great. And then here's the MV2. Just controlling the overall output of the reverb. Put it back on. So it's just bringing the reverb in just a little bit more. I like having an MV2 on the end of all of my reverbs and delays, because then I can sort of adjust them without necessarily having to do a lot of volume automation. So the piano has another couple of secret weapons on it. The EQ is pretty nice on this. It's a lot of high mid boost, some 5K, some 9K, but it's controlled at about 8K. So what I'm doing is I'm boosting above it and then low passing it. So I'm like kind of going in there and boosting a shelf up here, so it brings a nice amount of high end, but then I'm cutting it with the low pass. It's an interesting way of working, again, very Dave Jordan, boosting and cutting in similar areas. But the biggest thing here, honestly, is here, coming over here. Bulbs are blown, but there's a bit of 100 boost here for the low end. And again, it's high passed close to that area. So what this is doing is boosting, but it's kind of bringing up a little bit of the lows, a little wider than that. But then there's also some 5K on it as well. So it just makes the piano just a bit more aggressive. Just a little bit more. I mean, it's a lot of money to throw at a piano, a pair of Pultecs, but it does sound beautiful. So you can try that with, you know, the Waves Pultecs or the UAD ones, whichever ones you've got, and you'll really like what it does to the piano. It's really beautiful.
Dick called me up because he was coming to Los Angeles, and this was a project that I guess he'd been working on for a while. which I wasn't aware of actually, but called me up and asked me if I'd like to do it, and I was more than happy to. I always like working with Dick because I worked with him since about '77 in different situations, and we've been friends from the Alice Cooper days. So I was more than happy to help out. Plus, it's for a good cause, and St. Jude's, and I think it was just a fun thing to do.
And can you talk in general a little bit about recording with Dick? Like, what's his approach as opposed to some of the other folks you've worked with?
Oh, I think Dick's approach to recording is kind of, in some ways, more old school. He looks for, I think, a feel on the track, and I think he's good with musicians. He knows pretty much what he's looking for, and he has a very good sense of melody and arrangement. His stuff has always been melodic. That's what I liked about working with Dick, is that his stuff was always in a rock genre, but had heavy melodic influences. And I think he's a great writer, and it's always been fun to play his material. You know, Only Women Bleed. We did all that stuff with Alice, and I Never Cry, You and Me. How You Gonna See Me Now? Those are all classic hits that Alice recorded. You know, so I've always enjoyed working with him.
And great. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to today's song? Now, obviously, you know, we have footage of you, you know, sort of talking to Elliot and everybody else, and so just can you talk about how you prepare for a session and
Well, you prepare and you diligently look at the chart and you listen to the demo, and then you come here and you change everything. That's what you do.
That's what I suspected. That's why I want to talk about it. I mean, what was it before and what is it now?
Well, it was a different structure in the sense there weren't stops, and there were, you know, certain accentuations and different chordal things. So we added little things, but when you're doing a session and you've got something in one form and slight things change, it's little things that can throw you off on sessions, not the big things. So we went over it pretty thoroughly, and I was glad we did, because you know, you hope that when you rewrite a chart or you rework something just before a session, that it's going to improve it, because it can go two ways. But because Dick has a direction, I think he knows where he's going exactly. So we kind of enlarged the track to fit the magnitude of what he's trying to do here. Before, it was a smaller track. It was actually a little different feel, and now I think it's become a little larger feel now with everybody's input.
And with your playing, a few folks have talked about what it's like to prepare for layers and layers of vocalists that are coming. Do you have to, you know, play? Do you leave spaces? I mean, do you play more sparsely? I mean, what?
I do try to leave spaces because, when other people are coming to add a lot of stuff, vocalists particularly, you never know exactly what's going to transpire. So you try and leave room. And I'll just play down near the middle of the piano and leave out fills and stuff if I can, you know, depending on, you know, it's just a guessing game. You try and put in what you think is right, and you hope that you're right. It's, you know, and maybe you hope your experience tells you where to put something in, but you're not always right. It's, it's human error all the time, so you're just trying to hedge your bets and your experience and hope that what you play is correct. But I do try to lay out a little bit more when there are, I try to push the bottom end sometimes. It's a different thing because I have a heavy left hand, and some piano players I think play a little lighter in the middle, and I tend to accentuate a lot of bottom and mid-range because I like that big piano sound. So I try to scale that off, back that off a little bit if I know other people are going to be participating, and just try to set up a basis for people to sing on.
Did you feel like at the very end you were able to play a little more of that? Because I felt sort of an uplift at the end. Almost.
Yeah, as the tune goes by, I start to kick it up a little bit. I try to, add a little stuff and, go for broke. Hope you don't, end up with the Bugs Bunny scenario where your hands go flying off the keyboards and you bang your head, which has never happened to me often. But, I just try to boost the track towards the end a little bit.
One of the things that I mentioned, that I heard in the session was Dick was talking about sort of a Motown feel for some of the stops and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about the vocabulary you guys use to communicate to each other when you've just met to try to cut corners to like speak in shorthand?
Well, if you can imagine mental patients running naked through a forest, that's the vocabulary that we would be using. Kind of screaming, grunts, moans. But basically, we, musical dialogue is, it's just, jargon that we've learned throughout the years, Can you give them a, but it goes everywhere from, can you hit it on bar one and hold it for 4 beats to, can you make it sound more like a cookie, which people have said, So it's whatever someone wants to use to convey a feeling to help you, direct you. That's all it is direction. And we have, cues amongst one another, I guess, but generally, once you get it, then you've got a roadmap. It's like reading a roadmap and finding your way through it. Sometimes you go down the wrong street, but try not to. But Yeah, I guess the jargon is just typical musician jargon. You know, hit it a little harder, build up for the bridge. You know, hit the chorus hard. You know, build up from the verse to the chorus. That kind of stuff. You know, and people know what that means.